Hello folks, this is Fluorescent FIFA, here with the next video in my tips and tricks series, which is how to aim on manual part 2. If you do not know what manual controls are, head to the description, there's a link in there to the first video which will explain it all for you. If you do know what manual controls are but have managed to miss part 1 of this, and you think it might be useful, similarly, link is in the description. Go check that out, because that will go over some basics of how to aim on manual, and in this one I'm going to try and do a little bit more advanced, some more advanced tips and tricks. Okay, so firstly, thank you for all of the positive feedback on part 1. It seemed to go down quite well. A lot of you have said that you seem to find it useful, which is great. That's encouraging. This part, like I said, is going to be a bit more experimental. We're just going to have to see how this goes. But before I go over some of the stuff in this one, there are a couple of things I need to point out. Firstly, this part is intended for some of the more difficult aiming techniques. So when you're in a situation where maybe you have to pass the ball first time, or you can't turn in the direction you want to face, so you can't have any sort of real estimate of exactly where your aim's going. I do get a few questions from time to time, basically on some of my videos, asking how on earth do you do that, or how do you aim like that? If I give an example, if I take a pass from one of my recent goal compilations, this kind of thing here does not happen often on manual. It doesn't matter how much you've played or how good you are, this doesn't happen often. So you can't expect me to be able to explain how to do this when I can hardly ever do it myself. It happens occasionally, but most of the time those will go wrong, or I'll mess it up. No matter how much you play manual, you will never ever perfect it. You will never get everything right. And it's important that you guys realise that. You can't expect instant results, because if you see my goal compilations, you'll look at them and think, he does all of this, stuff all the time. I really don't. You see the best of what I do, and you don't see a lot of the stuff that goes wrong. So it's important for you to remember that you will never perfect manual. You can master it, but you will never perfect it. So you can't expect too much. You can't expect to have a look at a tutorial like this and then suddenly get every pass right. And part of the reason for that is as much as I hate to say it, there really is no substitute for practice. What I am basically being asked to do in this tutorial, I think I mentioned in the previous part, is you are asking for me to tell you how to hold the analog stick in the correct direction in every given situation. And I can't really explain that. I can't teach you how to hold an analog stick at 30 degrees when a player is 30 degrees away from you, if you know what I mean. It's extremely difficult for me to do. But I can give a few pieces of advice which I hope might help. That's what I'm going to do in this part. Some of them... Well, one or two of them I use occasionally, but the majority of them I don't use, which is why I'm saying it's experimental, because of the amount of time I've played manual for, I can just aim naturally. Like I say, I don't get it right every time, but I don't have to sort of really think about it now. It's just second nature, and with practice it will become second nature to all of you as well. But I will have a go at trying to explain some things which help, so we'll get to those bits of advice. So the first piece of advice in this video isn't actually linked to how to aim specifically, it's more a useful thing that you should know about aiming. The ball goes where you hold on the analog stick is what I've been saying in the previous videos, but what you can do is that you can adjust where you initially aim on the analog stick before your player kicks the ball. So the ball goes where the direction you hold most recently on the analog stick. When your player's about to start his kicking animation, if that makes sense. So if you run up to the ball and are about to kick it, and you've powered up your pass and held up, if you then decide that up's not the direction you want to go and you want to go down, as long as you hold down on the analog stick before your player kicks the ball, he will try and kick it downwards. So you don't have to go the initial direction that you've held, you can adjust it if you really want to. So if I try and give a quick example of this in the arena, the problem I have is that I don't have a camera, so you can't see my hands doing this, but you'll just have to believe me that I'm doing this. If I'm running down the pitch with Van der Vaart, if I hold, say, up to pass it and then adjust it, you see how it goes to Adebayor. Obviously that wasn't accurate, but if I was initially passing to Bale, as long as I change the direction I'm holding on the analog stick before I pass the ball, then it will go in the new direction I'm holding. So if I try and demonstrate again, if I hit it way in front of me with Adebayor, if I hold down and then up, as long as I do it before the pass is done, I'm able to adjust my aim. So it's not exactly how to aim, but that's another useful thing that you should be aware of. Piece of advice number 2 is a bit of a strange one. I personally never do this, but a few people have said that they might think this is a way to do it. It might sound a bit stupid to some people, perhaps, I don't know. But one of the really good ways to check that you're aiming the right way on manual is very simply to look at the controller. What I mean by that is, I mean sort of, if you have a situation where you've hit the ball a good distance ahead of you or something, let's say you're running down the wing and you've hit it way in front of you and you want to cross the ball. If you really want to, there's nothing to stop you looking down on the analog stick just to check that you're holding the direction you want to play it. Obviously, the slight disadvantage with that is that you're then probably not looking at the screen, which means you might miss out on something that happens on screen. But I have wondered if people do this, if people do actually look at the pad when they do it. I personally don't, because I'm just someone who's played a lot, so I don't feel the need to, because I'm used to aiming without having to do that. But if you've got the time to do it, then it's probably a pretty good way of checking that you're doing the right thing. So I don't see any harm, especially in looking at the direction you're aiming on the pad to check if it's the right way if you've got a chance. And that obviously will work whether or not you're facing the right direction or not. So I think there's no harm in giving that a go, and if any of you do that, let me know. I'd be interested to know. But I don't see any reason why that shouldn't work. So in some situations, like I say, probably a situation where you've hit the ball significantly ahead of you is the best place to use that. But I think that could work. And now the last bit of this video, the main reason that I'm calling this an experimental part is because I can't tell you how to aim the right direction. I can't teach you how to hold the right direction on the analog stick for every situation, but I think I might be able to at least get you going a little bit. We'll see. So basically what I've got is a test. This is where the piece of advice from the previous video about using the telecamera will be useful, because it will be easiest to do this test on the telecamera. Basically, I think that the easiest 4 directions to aim correctly on the analog stick are up, down, left and right. What you can do is, if you go to the practice arena, you can basically practice holding up, down, left and right without having to look at the analog stick. So for up and down, you can use the pitch lines, the lines across the pitch to tell. So what you do is, if you run, say, to the right or to the left, and then try and hold vertically down or vertically up on the analog stick, you can test it using the pitch lines to see if you can do that without having to face that direction. And then if you get the hang of that, that will prove to be very useful for crossing in particular. Because if you can hold vertically down or vertically up without having to face the right way, because in general you'll be in a crossing position where you want to hold vertically up or vertically down to get the cross in the right position, that means that you should be able to make your crosses much more reliable, much more dangerous, much more likely to get them right. Similarly, there is a test that you can do for getting left and right correct on the analog stick. If you run down towards the touchline or up towards the touchline, whichever you prefer, then you can use the touchline as a test of whether or not you can hold the direction correctly. So the idea is that you try and keep the ball within play so it doesn't go out of touch, but at the same time you try not to make it go too far in field. This way you can check whether or not you can get left and right correct on the analog stick without having to face the direction in order to play the ball there. And then this can be useful in games for shooting and passing in particular, because it enables you to sometimes play through passes where maybe you have to hold left or right and you need to get it dead on, maybe without facing that way. And it can also be useful for shooting. If you take this example here, if I hold vertically left on the analog stick, it's going to go pretty close to going in at the near post, and this one does go in at the near post. So again, that's another example where you are then able in a game to not have to face the right way in order to get some of the basic aiming directions correct. And the next stage, if you will, is the 4 in-between directions, so top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. This one's much harder to tell on any camera whether or not you're getting it right, but the test, I reckon, is if you take the ball somewhere around here, so somewhere between the side of the 18-yard box and the D, and then you try and make sure you play it, so in this case, top left, to the goalkeeper within the goal, without facing in that direction. Similarly, you can go to the other side and try and do it bottom left to the goalkeeper within the goal. So as if it was going in, but you do it with a pass. So that way you're checking whether or not you can roughly aim top left or bottom left without having to look that way. And then again, you've then got 6 directions, and similarly you can do it with the other goal with shots to see if you can just get it on target without having to look. And then this obviously opens up a lot more opportunities in games. You can do finesse shots from that sort of angle quite often, and all kinds of things. But what the sort of main point of this experiment is, if you can then get the hang of aiming in those 8 basic directions without having to turn your player to face that way, then in theory what you should be able to do is, if you are in a position where you say you need to pass it at in between 2 of those directions, so let's say you needed to pass it not quite up but not quite up and right, if you know how to aim those 2 directions on the analog stick, then at the very least you know that you're going to be able to aim in between them, because you know not to go up and know not to go up right. You should have the sense and the sort of feel of getting those 8 directions. Now in terms of getting every single angle perfect, that's just going to come with practice. But if you can sort of know, even if you start from the basic 4, if you know how to hold up all the time on the analog stick, if you know how to hold right all the time on the analog stick, then when you have a pass that needs to go somewhere in between up and right, you at least have a chance of being more accurate if you've got the hang of this technique. I hope. Anyway, like I say, this is an experiment. I cannot guarantee this works. I have not tried this myself in terms of checking my aim, because I'm at the point where I'm just sort of, it's second nature to me to aim. I don't have to do this kind of thing. But for someone who's new, I'm hoping it might be somewhat helpful. In terms of, you know, that technique and how much it helps, I would really like to know from you guys whether or not you think it's useful, whether or not you try it out and find it useful. I hope it should help to some extent, even if it only helps with you aiming in 4 basic directions. But in terms of getting all sort of 360 degrees perfect, there is no substitute for practice. I know it's not the most helpful thing to say, but honestly, it really is the best way to get better, is simply to play. But if that technique helps, if you find it useful, if you think it improves, please let me know. Or if you maybe have a suggestion of your own for other people, that would be great as well. So if you could let me know what you thought of this video. Likes and stuff are always great. If you could leave a comment with some feedback as well, that would be fantastic. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I will be along with a new tutorial at some point. I don't know what it'll be yet, but I will do one at some point. But I might take a bit of a break from tutorials for the moment. But in the meantime, and until then, play manual.